Hi, thank you for joining us here today. My name is Lauren McCowan, and I am Site's Communication Strategist, and I am joined today by Brittany Montgomery, one of our doctoral researchers in the Site program. And I'm really excited about our conversation today. Brittany and I are going to talk a little bit about the role of ethics in technology evaluation. So, Brittany, I'm wondering if you could start us off by just talking a little bit about what ethics are. How do we think about ethics within technology evaluation?
So simply defined, ethics really means principles of decent human conduct. How would you want to be treated? How would I want to be treated? Principles of fairness, of honesty, of decency, of respect. And so maybe you've heard of the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take, where they pledge to do no harm to their patients and to treat everyone with dignity and fairness. And so that oath is one good example of ethical principles.
Got it. And so take me from sort of doctors and the medical field to technology evaluation and global development. How do ethics sort of translate into that environment, and why are they important in that environment?
So that's a great question. There are many professions. I mentioned the medical profession, civil engineering, accounting, city planning. There are lots of professions that have principles of ethics. But international development professionals come from such a wide variety of professions that we don't really have a unifying principle of ethics. And so in evaluations, even though we're not directly treating an illness, we still have the potential to harm whoever is a participant in our evaluations. And so we have to think very carefully about ethics in an evaluation. It requires us to take a step back and think about the motivation, our motivation for evaluating products in the developing world. And I think really that boils down to our goals of helping to improve the quality of life and enhancing capabilities for people around the world. So we most certainly don't want to put them in harm's way during our evaluations.
Right. And so how do we, if we sort of think about this, in the day-to-day life of a development practitioner, what are some of the situations in which a development practitioner, or say someone conducting a technology evaluation, might run up against an ethical consideration? What are some of those common scenarios?
So there are a couple of main kind of interaction points that we see in product evaluation. Even though the idea of product evaluation is really talking about a product, we come into contact with many people during that evaluation. And so there are two kind of broad categories of interactions. The first, I would say, is thinking about interviews with potential users of the evaluation that might be testing our products, that might be giving us information about how they use the product in their daily lives, or even product manufacturers. And I would say the second really typical interaction that we have with other people during the process of an evaluation is in product testing and data collection in the field. So for example, Site tested the durability of solar lanterns in the field by giving them to real users of those lanterns in Uganda.
Great. So Uganda is one example of where we sort of ran into some of these ethical considerations. What are some of the actual ethical dilemmas that start to occur when you're doing field-based testing?
So there are three main challenges that I would say Site comes across consistently in all of our product evaluations. And the first of those is creating clear and just expectations about how participation in our evaluation might benefit interview subjects, product testers, product manufacturers, or other people and organizations involved in the evaluation. For example, any sort of evaluation undertaken by a Western researcher in a non-Western country is going to create a power differential. And so people with low incomes or little education might have a completely different set of expectations about what they would get from participating in the evaluation. And we have to be conscious of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even gender differences. Say, sending a male researcher to work with an all-women's organization like the Self-Employed Women's Organization in India can also create a power differential. Now, in that case, we actually involved other women as enumerators in surveys and interview questions to rectify that situation. And so, really, we have to think about and be cognizant of these different power dynamics. But at the same time, we have to do something about it and have to make sure that we're working together with our partners in the evaluations to create reasonable and just expectations around what's going to come out of the evaluation. And so another example that kind of highlights that is building trust and rapport with our interview subjects. And so we may go into the field and want to understand how people use a product, and we don't want to waste people's time or give them false hopes of, say, compensation, for example, by participating in an interview. So if we have to ask those questions, what are we going to give to someone in return for their time? And so if we don't compensate someone, for example, we might return really valuable information to them. So in the case of looking at water filter test kits in India, after we tested different water types, we gave households the ability to go back and test their own water and taught them how to use these test kits in their own home so that they could benefit from the evaluation.
Right.
And so another thing that we think about for these expectations is working with product manufacturers. We don't want to set up a situation in which a product manufacturer working on a new product, for example, may get an unfair advantage over other manufacturers just by participating in our evaluation.
Great.
And so a second challenge, I would say, that is really big is thinking about the trade-off between scientific robustness, which is what MIT and CITE are really known for, and what is socially just. And so, for example, you might think about wanting to understand the way a microgrid works based on solar panels for a small set of villages in any country, and go and say, well, the best way for me to figure this out is to select a random sample of households, give them electricity for a couple of weeks based on my microgrid, and test and see how well that went. Well, that's fundamentally unfair, even though it may be the most scientifically robust way to test. And I would say the third challenge is thinking about how we collect data in a manner that ensures the privacy and confidentiality of anyone who would be involved in that data collection. And so this is not just about interviewees or survey participants, but it's also about remote data collection with sensors. So for example, we have an evaluation with CITE that looks at different types of wheelchairs and uses sensor-based technology to get at how those wheelchairs are used in the field. And we want to make sure that in that evaluation, the data that we collect doesn't allow us or doesn't allow anyone else to track the location of that particular user or to identify him or her.
Right, absolutely. No, that's critical. So if I'm a person, taking this course, I'm one of the students, or I'm, thinking of conducting my own technology evaluation and, keeping these very challenging and real potential dilemmas, ethical dilemmas in mind, what are some of the ways that I can sort of consider ethics from the very beginning in building my technology evaluation out to ensure that those things are addressed? Things always pop up, but how can we sort of build that in from the beginning?
So I would say the very first step is to consider what the Institutional Review Board or Ethics Committee in your particular country recommends. Now in the United States, we have an ethics committee that is run out of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that establishes specific guidelines for research institutions within our country. And there are many kinds of ethics review boards in countries all over the world. That's a great place to start for some initial guidelines. But with evaluation, we have to be really careful that we go beyond what those specific evaluation or requirements of an ethics committee are to look at the evaluation in detail and make sure that we're not unjustly or unfairly treating anyone that's involved in our evaluation. We don't want to have a detrimental impact on anyone during this process. And so, for every evaluation, we're going to have a distinct set of contextual variables or participants in the evaluation that shape those nitty-gritty details as to how we complete the evaluation. But we always have to think about ethics from the very beginning of that evaluation, from the scoping phase and from that initial planning phase. Ethics are fundamental in any kind of international development work, and they have to be at the forefront of product evaluation.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. And thank you for watching. I think we'll be posting a list of resources and ethical questions that you can think about as you're designing your own technology evaluations in the field going forward. Thanks so much.